Thank you so much. And so it's quite a change now, but it's, I think, the span of this conference, which is quite exciting. And we move on now, I think, more to the other end, to the patient. And I welcome as next speaker Volker Wetekam, who is the CEO of General Electric Healthcare Germany. Just a brief introduction. He is since this year, he's CEO of GE Healthcare in Germany. He's a trained scientist and studied and made his PhD in economy. Before he joined General Electric, he served in several management and executive positions in Agfa Healthcare and Siemens Medical, which both are deep into IT matters in healthcare. Within General Electric, he is in charge of strategic policy and operating business in the GE fields of medical imaging, information technologies, medical diagnostics, patient monitoring, pharmaceutical research, and biopharmaceutical product technology. So it's a wide span again, and I think we are very curious to listen to his talk about this topic as next one.
Yes, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I found the previous talk outstanding, really excellent, and would like to congratulate you. The topic that I would like to draw your attention to in the coming 20 minutes or so is much more practical. So I'd like to make the statement that many national IT programs, both in Europe, in North America, but also in other regions, have seen some struggle over the last decade or so. And I can see healthcare IT projects evolving more from national programs to regional programs. This is a very interesting study, which was basically published a year or 2 years ago, both from the Economist, but also by the IBM Institute, which basically looked at all the different industries that there are. And they claimed that the healthcare industry, of all industries, is the least competitive one in terms of productivity gains and, in this case, missing efficiency. And very often IT people and people out of finance and all the other industries, they finger point to the healthcare industry and say, you guys should be more efficient. And I think the previous speaker has shown in an excellent way that healthcare is a very complex practice. It's much, much more complex than other industries. And I've been in this industry for 18 years, and I think the reason for this industry not being very, very efficient from a cost perspective is mainly due to its complexity and not due to the lack of willingness to improve that efficiency. And I believe IT systems in healthcare will become the single key enabler to reduce cost, but at the same time improve quality of care. When we look at the population overall, we are now understanding that basically half of the world's population is somehow located in Asia, which is the blue block you see on the right-hand side. And the population will increase by more or less a billion of people in the coming 15 years. Now, the second trend, in addition to demographic changes and an increasing population, is the urbanization. And actually, this year, in March 2012, it was the date when, for the first time in the world's history, more people lived in cities, in urban areas, than in rural areas. And this trend is going to not only continue, but increase in speed and accelerate tremendously. And I looked at the US and China in detail, and what you basically see here is the number of people living in the greater communities of large cities, both in the US and in China. And you see that blue is US, red is China, and you see that the compound annual growth rates of increasing population in city, especially in China, is in the order of 2 to even 3–4%. In some areas, Shenzhen, for instance, even up to 14.5%. And these numbers for China are still underrepresented. If you, for instance, look at places like Zhongqing, which is more or less in the middle, or slightly in the east part, but still in the middle of China, these greater areas currently have a population of almost 30 million people, so much bigger than anybody would think of. And the compound annual growth rates for those regions in the coming years are in the order of 2 to 3%. And this is going to continue, and it's not only going to continue in China, it's going to continue in Germany, in the UK, in France, in North America, in the US. And interestingly enough, the mayor of New York recently said that they really want to turn New York City into the leading finance center of the world, but also the leading technology center of the world. And the target is to increase the population in Greater New York to more than 20 and 30 million in the years to come. Now, going back to the topic in IT programs, many governments in many countries have tried out many national programs. So the basic idea, and this is also what Google tried to do, is we build a common patient health record, a common electronic medical record, and we roll it out in a given country. Or in the case of Google with a personal health record, we do it globally. All of those projects more or less have failed. They failed due to significant time lag. They failed due to lack of acceptance. And they failed because patient care has always been local and will mostly stay local in a given region or suburb or greater area, or in the case of a rural area in a larger regional area. So the claim is, especially if you look at the RIOs, the regional initiatives in the US, out of the 190 RIOs which have been initiated, regional projects in the US, 58 have turned to be successful. And most important to me is actually the development in China. In 2008, China introduced the first stimulus program. It was 575 billion, or $500 billion US to stimulate the economy. And this money was given into the Chinese economy, controlled out of Beijing. And some of these infrastructure programs were also controlled out of Beijing for the whole country of China. This year, a second stimulus program will be issued into the country. It will be more than double in size, so 1.2 trillion US dollars, to stimulate the Chinese economy once more. And significant parts of this will go into the healthcare sector. And guess what? This time, it will not be controlled centrally out of Beijing. The money will be given to the different provinces in China, and they decide on their own how much and what they are going to do with this to support and sponsor healthcare initiatives. Now, if you look at all these IT projects, those large IT projects on a national scale, on a regional scale, even on an international scale, the basic principle is always the same. They try to make clinical knowledge, clinical data available to physicians, patients in a given space, in a given area. And so when people talk about siloed data, you basically talk about separate databases that are not interlinked from a content point of view. And the trick is always to cloud enable those databases. So you need to apply some kind of common infrastructure middleware on top of those legacy digital archives, and you want to turn those into a cloud which is accessible from different systems in hospitals, private practitioners, and in some cases also from the patient, him or herself. Now, what this is, how does it look from a technical point of view? So when someone runs and introduces a successful regional program or even national program, it doesn't mean you build a net new data center hosting thousands of big archives and you copy and paste all the data into a single big data center. What you do is you try to reuse existing infrastructure, put a very thin layer on top of it, and basically turn different silos from different hospitals, different healthcare systems, even practitioners, into a commonly accessible archive, which turns into a digital cloud with this middleware. And those technologies are currently developed in the scientific world. I mean, all of the different industry companies, they're trying to tap on this and trying to understand it. But the trick is really here that industry and the scientific work together, the scientific world works together and strive for this thin layer. Now, why do have so many projects failed? Why do have so many national projects failed, both in terms of clinical care and in terms of financial outcome? The most prominent example is probably the NPFIT program, so the National Program for Healthcare IT, which was announced under the Blair government, I think in 2003, where the simple idea was, let's introduce one common electronic medical record to the UK. And the money that was made available was just tremendous. So it was not a lack of funding, but there was a lack of disease clinical focus. There was a lack of adherence to standards, and there was a lack of acknowledgement of different requirements in different regions in the UK. The requirements in healthcare in certain areas in London are different to the requirements in healthcare in other areas. And in 2010, after 6 or 7 years of trial and ongoing trial, the government finally decided to open up this program, to stop it basically, and to give the power back to the regional healthcare providers and allow them to build up own regional networks, own regional applications that are more plurally led by different healthcare providers which belong to the NHS. Another very prominent example to me is the electronic health card in Germany. A project where I was personally involved to write the technical specification in 2001 and 2 and 3. And it was announced by the government in 2003 at the CeBIT in Hanover that by the end of 2005 and the beginning of 2006, all of the 80 million inhabitants in Germany would carry a card in their pocket. And this electronic health card would not only have data on it, but it would also have disease-specific applications which were important to a patient himself. And this project failed, and it was not only delayed by 6 years, but all of the clinical applications basically have disappeared, and it's a pure infrastructure project without any clinical applications on top of it right now. So there's many national programs globally, as you can see. Some are going okay, some of them were stopped. Now, how do a regional solution look like? Now, if you introduce a regional solution, for instance, into the city of Berlin or into the city of Frankfurt, you have to cope with a lot of different clinical data. So there's all of the different departments in a hospital or from a private practitioners providing unstructured and structured clinical data and all kinds of image data and cinemovie data, for instance, out of cardiology. And you usually have many, many companies involved in that. And then the second question is, do you build up a central archive in a city, or do you put a middle layer, a middleware on top of it, as I explained it earlier, and you basically reuse the existing archive solutions, which in my eyes makes much more sense. The left approach makes much more sense, both from a cost perspective, but also from a performance perspective. Because the right approach in itself, if your region grows, if your number of processes and computational transactions grow over time, a centralized system will always collapse at a certain point in time. Now, some very prominent and successful examples in my eyes have been kicked off out of Paris very recently over the last 5 to 6 years. So there was a decision in Paris to basically get rid of radiographic film and introduce a common archive into Paris to look at diagnostic images in an electronic version. Also, there was a decision by RPHP, the leading healthcare provider in Paris, to basically get rid of more than 100 legacy systems, standardize everything on one system, and introduce a common EMR. But the most exciting example I really found in Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo, I visited that city 3 years ago. It's a very rough place, believe me. It's a very, very rough place. And basically, you can go into 20%, 30% of the city, and 70% of the city is dangerous. And many physicians, radiologists, they don't want to work in those 70% with underprivileged areas and underprivileged people. But they still need a lot of healthcare, and they should get the same quality standards as in the other areas. So what they did is basically they established imaging centers in all parts of Sao Paulo. They read images all over Sao Paulo, and the reading and the diagnosis is done centrally in 2 or 3 different shifts, which I think is an excellent example of a regional healthcare IT solution supporting the nation. So there's more to come. What's next in healthcare? And this ties back a little bit to the previous speaker. In 2003, the World Health Organization allocated a lot of funding after the genome was decoded, to really find a relationship between anomalies in the genome structure and the prevalence of certain diseases. And there were, I think, more than 200 scientists involved. And it took them 2 years to deliver the first dependency between a certain anomaly in the genome structure and the prevalence or occurrence of a certain disease. 1 year later, 3 additional occurrences were found. And in the first quarter of 2007, another 5. The second quarter, another 20 or 30. The third quarter, another 20. The fourth quarter. In the first quarter of 2008, so there is an explosion, and this is the second quarter of 2008, and I wouldn't be able to show you the findings which are available right now. But this is a perfect example, which also tells you that healthcare content cannot be national. The treatment as a patient is local, but the content you need for sophisticated healthcare needs to be global and needs to be made available in a webified global environment. So that's basically my statement and the summary. So it's important that IT systems make data accessible to physicians at the patient, where the patient is treated and where actually care is provided. I'm absolutely convinced, and the example I gave you out of Brazil or France, that regional care, good regional IT care solutions have always proven to have the capability to bring down cost, but at the same time increase quality of care. And on the other hand, we need to treat clinical content and decision-making support on a national basis, and need to make it available, obviously, through the internet, so that physicians can use it in their daily practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very clear talk, which at least gives me the impression that you would have the ideal solution if only it would work. And in practice, however, we have tremendous problems to even put into practice the simplest things, and the German example is certainly not a very good one. I think we have 5 minutes left, and I would ask if you would like to give comments or ask questions to one or the other of the speakers. If not, you? Okay.
One general question. Thank you very much for your excellent lecture. In the German case, one line was lack of leadership. Who should have taken the lead in Germany?
This project has been led over the last 10 years by a group called Selbstverwaltung, okay? Which basically in itself means there is no leadership, and you put together a group of people who coordinate themselves. So also in this group, there has not been a leader, and this has been put in place on purpose. I think that was a mistake in the first place, but the more important mistake was that the project lost its focus on diseases, and on dedicated prevention programs. I think the infrastructure component is great, but even if you take the infrastructure component, which is currently rolled out in Germany, that should be done on a European basis. I don't even think that's good to do it in Germany on its own. Austria did a very similar project, and they rolled out a different infrastructure with the very same content. The same is true for Switzerland and France. So yeah, obviously I'm trying to make some provocative statements, but it's yeah, that's my view.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
My question goes to Professor Rajewski. Did you look for other tissue to find circular RNA or only in brain? That would be very interesting for the whole community. Thank you.
Was it a question or a comment?
Question, I think.
A question.
The question was, so yeah, we look in everything
tissue.
now. So we also looked in leukocytes, we looked in hematopoietic system, we looked in brain. We're now doing a big screen in all kinds of samples from many body parts, healthy and disease. So this is going on.
And are there clusters or individually differences? Could you analyze this? Or brain is the main topic in your research?
No, it's not. Brain
No.
is not the main topic of these RNAs. No.
Okay, thanks.
Volker? Yeah, okay.
I was going to ask what culture change you see needed within healthcare to enable the IT innovation. So from the clinical side, how do you see IT adoption and innovation?
I think the key cultural change necessary is that we no longer look at IT as infrastructure only. And as he also indicated in his example, IT to me is really a key application to change the way we diagnose and we treat and we do prevention. And it's not just a bunch of cable and so forth. So if that cultural change is going to evolve, and it has started, it is going to evolve further, then these programs will be embraced big time, and they're going to be successful all over the world.
Super. Last question.
Yes, to Mr. Wetekam. You said that one of the reasons we had such a delay in Germany and such mismanagement, to put it bluntly, in getting an e-health record going was the lack of focus on disease. I personally think that doesn't even go far enough. I think the focus should be on the target population, should be on the patient. If the patient would realize, the people would realize what the potential of that card would mean to them personally, that's powerful.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
There's no one who will ask them. Yeah, I think we are well in time, and I thank both speakers for their excellent talks, and they even brought things together which was not from the upfront to be expected. And I thank you very much for attending this session, and I ask you to, after having had your coffee, to come back to this room and go for the next, also very interesting session, which I think tops on that point about health cloud. And I wish a good break, and then see us later back here.